Celebrating 9 years of podcast excellence, the King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us.
Internet wrestling community, I am speaking to you tonight directly, my fellow beloved podcast brethren in this internet wrestling community, the journalists that write for this internet wrestling community. My message is this. You look at what happened on Dynamite tonight. For those disenfranchised internet wrestling community types, the citizens of the IWC, let's put it like that, fellow brothers, fellow sisters, when you see what Dynamite gave you tonight, AEW Dynamite, All Elite Wrestling Dynamite tonight, and you look at the level of this NXT ECW kind of feel, and you get a hodgepodge of matches, and you really got something that was just out there and stood out in front of everybody. And to me, when I look at what we saw tonight, you got several debuts of various areas. First of all, Switchblade Jay White makes his debut with the Bullet Club. We saw him in Impact Wrestling. You know, he's been working in New Japan for a long time, and that was a nice shock. I enjoyed that. We kept hearing the rumblings that Jay White was going to make his debut. We didn't know when. And then after that, Isaiah Cassidy has his qualifying match for the Revolution qualifier. Excuse me. What do they call that again? They call it the Face of the Revolution qualifying match. So it'll be a ladder match to be the Face of the Revolution. And I guess that would be Championship Contenders match at Revolution coming up in March. And Keith Lee, former WWE NXT champion, makes his debut. And in pretty much a very short fashion, finishes Isaiah Cassidy and done. And also, Keith Lee gets to celebrate the fact that he just got married over the weekend. That was nice. So he's had a very good week, an excellent week for him. What a way to go to the honeymoon. Oh, I got to work on Dynamite. I got to go make my debut. So you have that, plus a gruesomely deadly Texas Death Match with Lance Archer, the Murderhawk Monster, defeated at the hands in a really gruesome match against Hangman Adam Page. Excellent stuff tonight. The one thing I can tell you, Jade Cargill's matches need to be shortened up or give her a ground game. You know, there's just certain things that she has to do. I don't have no problem with AQA. I kind of feel like a Kiera Hogan kind of feel, but then Kiera Hogan came from Booker T's wrestling school as well, and that wrestling promotion that Booker T has in Texas and Houston. So I had no problem with her, and I don't know if we're going to see her much on Dynamite too much, as I figure we'll be seeing her on Dark and Dark Elevation, but that's fine. I actually thought she did really good. And that's what you got. And then you got matches set up. Tony Khan consistently gives you match cards after match cards after match cards. Like, you know who you're going to watch for the good bulk of every program that they have. Dark Elevation, I can find the promos on social media. I can see the graphics already ready to go hours before the show on YouTube. And then for Dynamite, you always know a couple of matches before the week before. And then you always know on Dynamite, you're going to know what's going to be on Rampage coming up. And they always, that format to me is smooth. It's great. Are there certain areas where some of the stars might not be at a certain level? You can argue that. I don't have a problem arguing that. But this is still not enough for some of those disenfranchised, bitter, frustrated, and, somewhat cynical, negative, and the IWC that just feels like they need to go and play a broken record. Because for whatever reason, the fans here in this internet wrestling bubble, you can't help yourself but complain and cajole about WrestleMania season and the things that they're doing and why they're doing it, when there are other wrestling outlets to watch on a regular basis. Now, I was going to bring this up a little bit later on in my monologue, but I want to bring this up real quick. I constantly get enjoyment of what I'm watching on television now on all the other products. I actually put a TikTok out. I stitched somebody on wrestling TikTok The guy got upset and said, "Don't ever talk about me again." But I wasn't. But I used the video he put up, which he allowed duets and stitches, to make a point. His point was that certain AEW stars don't get enough airtime on TV, and I agree with that. We can argue that too. But what it comes down to, there is so much talent of the stars that came from WWE, from New Japan, from other organizations, and they are now in AEW, and AEW is still trying to go ahead and satisfy the appetite of certain fans that really enjoyed the black and gold NXT, enjoyed the attitude era of WWE, and enjoyed the ECW era, some of the TNA, NWA TNA, Impact Wrestling type eras, things like that. They were getting that. That's what AEW offers, and the indie-rific stuff of what you can see in GCW or other places. Like, that's what you're getting with All Elite Wrestling. But because there is an animus with certain people watching the show because Cody pissed people off and the way the Young Bucks did it and all this other stuff, there's all this nepotism thing, right? Everybody has to make complaints or excuses about why they don't watch that show. And then they also do the same thing about WWE. And why? And you wonder, and I ask myself, no wonder. I mean, why do people think that they're this type of thought process, this type of complaining, this type of negativity, this constant criticism without any positive thinking or any kind of things? All it is fantasy booking, wishful thinking, and a broken record over. Why don't they do this? Why don't they do this? Why don't they do this? Skip, 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 like a broken record. And they can't help themselves. Every wrestling show does it. Everybody. I could almost be blamed for that too. I could be accused for that in past episodes. I could do that. I'm without reproach. I am not without reproach. I am. I could totally be a part of this conversation, but I can also know when I'm wrong. So I bring up my monologue tonight. I ask the question, why WWE's record profit ignores the IWC's broken record of ideas? Well, I'm going to tell you why. And if you want to read my diatribe, I have put it on the website, wrestlingisreal.com, underneath this episode. You can read it for yourself. I will take it word for word and I will add to it. But I pretty much wrote a long diatribe. I was thinking about it. I did some voice of text. I edited it down, put a little more to it. And I have a formulated opinion that I hope will be a gauge, an understanding, a reference that you can go back to again and again and again as to why this constant thought process and the reason why this program has existed for almost 10 years, 9 years and 3 months. It's because, and what are we, 672 episodes later. It's because I keep trying to thump over the head over and over again. I am a wrestling fan across. This is not WWE is real. This is not AEW is real. Wrestling is real. I look at the reality of how things are and why wrestling promotions are. And I'll tell you, wrestling is as good as it's ever been across the entire spectrum of the sport. Because WWE decides to go a little more sports entertainment now. They're deciding to go with more athletes, more athletic types. They're neglecting or pushing aside certain stars that were given a different spot because people had an adulation for them, had an affinity towards them, had a loyalty towards them. To see them grow, they like their underdogs. And how many of those stars that you see right now in AEW that debut tonight, when it comes to Keith Lee, when it comes to Jay White, when it comes to AQA, underdogs. We like our underdogs. I like them too. Okay, I've been a long time Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan before Tom Brady came to the scene. And I watched that team lose a lot. I remember when I was watching baseball, I was an Atlanta Braves fan. And I watched that team lose and lose and lose until they finally won the World Series. It goes without saying, we like to see people being rewarded and people that we feel like have earned their spot. But when you're dealing with Oz and Vince McMahon, and he is the end-all be-all choice, do you expect that all of you younger fans that have no skin in the game, you only put out so much money invested in the sport, Are they going to listen to you? Or is he going to listen to Nick Khan, who has brought him in the $1 billion that they can claim as revenue this last year in 2021, according to their earnings report? Who do you think he's going to listen to? Plus, his circle of trust, because the fact he doesn't have a Pat Patterson. But you know who was around when Pat Patterson was around? Bruce Pritchard. And Bruce Pritchard's around forever. For better or for worse, Vince trusts the man. And for whatever reason, he likes to bring him in, kick him out. Bring him in, kick him out. Paul Heyman was the same way. Bring him in, kick him out. He has his people. He has his trust. And the track record of these people, he knows. Because, by the way, when Bruce Pritchard ever gets kicked out, you know what? He is never saying anything bad about Vince. He might be a little bit critical, but he never says anything to kind of, blow up anything about his chance to come back to work, because he knows. And that's what he does. And so, for him to go and find his way back into the circle, I'm not surprised, but that's what they're going to do. But as for everything else, and that's the other thing, to go ahead and pick on Bruce Pritchard and John Laurinaitis and whoever else, and why Triple H is not involved, and Shane, we thought he was gone, but now we realize he's still back in the fold. It's just he's not going to get his match with Seth Rollins at WrestleMania. Okay, that's all palace intrigue. That is all minuscule. It doesn't matter towards the ultimate nexus of what we are today as to why WWE is doing what they're doing. If it's making money now, that's what they're going to do. So if part-timers are coming back, so be it. Let me go into my diatribe. Reliance on part-timers every WrestleMania season, as WWE ignores the IWC's choice of main eventers, and they remain ignorant to their ideas on what WWE needs to do to improve their day-to-day creative. I mean, if they had this fixed, I don't even know if I'd have a program. I don't even know if I would have a program to talk about. But the reason I started this show in December 2012 is because I needed a vessel. I needed a platform to complain about this shit, because I was tired in 2012 about how things were going with the product. And at the time, TNA was, kind of there, but we know they were going to be the end-all be-all answer. They had already had their chance to try to go on Monday nights, go head-to-head, and completely fail. To a chronic creative system that had to be headed by Hulk Hogan and his creative control clause, and Eric Bischoff and Rob Conway and whoever else was back there, Terry Taylor. The bottom line was we still had that problem back then. It has not changed. And the fact of the matter is that the creative is being done in a certain format because they have to do that, because how else do you honestly think? And I don't know if I put this in my diatribe, but I'm going to say it right now. When you look at how television is programmed today, you got to tell yourself, and I'm talking about programming in general, there is no sports outlet that's able to go in. Now, a sporting event that is scheduled to play 4 quarters or 2 halves or whatever it is, three periods, there's a set time and format. The game's got to get played, and then you fill in the gaps. And then that with wrestling, with a Raw on Monday night, it's got to be 3 hours. You're going to have about 44 minutes or some odd of commercials, but then there's 2 hours, 16 minutes you got to fill. And they've tried every different way to kind of fill that time. Let's get really long matches. Let's give short matches. Let's give this. Let's give the same matches over and over. Let's just, shuffle the deck on the same matches in a program and the same characters in the program. We'll just switch it up. We'll juggle it, whatever. They do this all the time. And ultimately, they will give us a match that has a beginning, a very vague and muddled middle, and they do give us sometimes an end. They like to have their heels go over a lot. The babyfaces really don't get that much help, and they're always looking kind of stupid. This is the format they've worked with. This is the way that Vince has done it for a long time, except for very few exceptions. No surprise there. But this is one of the things you have to realize as well. There is a superstar glass ceiling, a WWE superstar glass ceiling. And it is an undertaking for them to be able to go and do what they want. There are certain stars that will never even come close to that ceiling in the eyes of Vince McMahon. And the ones that they feel like would get to a glass ceiling and would break it if allowed, they're going to stifle. That's what they do. When they build stars like Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, and Sasha Banks, Hollywood looks at them. And you can ask back in the day, you can look at Hulk Hogan as the first example. Because he started getting taken away to do projects. Look at that. He did everything going on late in his career in WWF at the end of the 80s. Doing No Holds Barred. He went away for taping that. He had all those other crappy B movies that he did. Mr. Nanny and all those other things that he was doing. A lot of appearances. And because he got to be so big and so popular, you couldn't help but notice what he was doing. And you couldn't help that the guy had just become such a larger-than-life character that, he was made such a large star. And you have other stars that get to that level, but then other things are going to be calling for them because you have such a star-making place in WWE because we look at the stars they've made. One of the biggest damn box office stars we have in The Rock. Everybody knows. Everyone remembers. He came from WWE. He came from the Attitude Era. And he spent a number of years in that place. But it's harder and harder for them to go ahead and come back and work. John Cena is another example. When you look at Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks now of the current roster, you're lucky right now that you're seeing these stars in full-time roles, that they're here. They might not work every house show, but man, they're there. Roman Reigns has been looked at for Hollywood. Becky Lynch has had a taste, and Sasha Banks has had a lot of taste of Hollywood. Why do you think she, takes time for her to come back? She's working on Disney products, man. She's working on Star Wars stuff, Mandalorian. That's some big deal. And then who knows what else she's working on? Hollywood looks at them, and Madison Avenue looks at them. So they look at what they can do. John Cena, so many movies he does right now. He's got the Peacemaker show. He's got Wipeout. He's got the Experience commercials. That guy doesn't stop. He is a money-making marketing machine. And everybody knows him from WWE. And when you have, and then Batista, another example. Look, he's in a big Super Bowl commercial right now. Did Blade Runner, Guardians of the Galaxy. Pick it. Oh, Dune. My thing is, when those stars get to that level, Vince loses control of them. He can't get them back. That star power, he doesn't get to use that star power when they come back. Very rarely do they do. And the money they have to go and shell out to get those stars back. Even Goldberg has had work where he's done reality shows and he's had other things going on. Like he's in a commercial right now for Dodge. These stars can come back. I mean, yeah, complain about Goldberg all you want. Ronda Rousey, complain about her all you want. But in the UFC, she was the darling in there. She made women's MMA. She was the face for several years. And people would, like they watch Conor McGregor today, they would watch that woman and see if somebody would kick her ass. And then it took a little bit, and somebody did. All right? Amanda Nunes did. Holly Holm, I think it was. You're just saying to yourself, man, people would watch to see that woman come down, scowl in her face, and then in 1 minute, she'd put an arm bar and done. And we watched those matches, and those were main event matches, by the way. She was as big as all the other heavyweights that could have been in the UFC. Bantamweight, women's, she ruled that division and put everybody else on the map afterwards in that division as well. There's no denying how powerful. And Brock Lesnar, same thing. He goes away. He did other couple of things, but when he went to UFC, man, takes down Shea Corwin, wins UFC title, and damn, and then the damn confrontation with him and Undertaker at an event at UFC. You're talking about stars that are breaking dimensions, breaking into going mainstream, totally mainstream. Would have never watched one of their matches, but then you see them. They're so likable. They're such approachable characters. They're so entertaining. They're so talented. Outside of the ring, so damn talented. And I can imagine Vince has to be frustrated to see those kind of stars go away. And what happens if you get other stars that get like that? What if Big E got to that point? What if Liv Morgan, God forbid, got to that point? What if Seth Rollins got to that point? Kevin Owens, you never know. But they're held to a certain level. They're kept to a ceiling. They all are. Now, the stars he will hold on to and you know, that he really, you know, there's a lot of respect for is when you see Shawn Michaels, that, you know, look, he's done the hunting show and really hasn't done anything else, you know, of mainstream or any programming of note. But that guy keeps coming back. He's been working behind the scenes at NXT, was doing matches in Saudi Arabia. When they needed him to go to Saudi Arabia, he came back out of retirement to go work and redo Generation X again, right? Triple H always kept working. Loyal to the company. He wants loyal for life in the company. That's what he wants. Goldberg, you know, except for a couple of things he's done, he still is associated with wrestling. He's a one-dimensional star, by the way, because, you know, when you look at him, for a while, Stone Cold I thought was going to be like that too, because, you know, they're one-dimensional characters. I mean, look, The Miz, Randy Orton, they've done movies. And you know what? They're not going to be super huge movie stars. Miz, he's a B-movie actor. That's okay. I mean, the reality show's done really well with him and Maurice, but that's also something he got from the company. And it still is another vehicle to promote WWE, but otherwise, he's not losing any time. He's working every week as well. So when you look at that, there are certain stars that will be one-dimensional characters. They're all going to just stay right there, and, you know, they're not going to do anything where they're going to be so popular, going to move around. Like, you know, you'd be surprised. I was still surprised that Batista made it to how he did. And we discovered this other character, this other side of Batista that was like, wow, this guy just turned it around. He took the acting lessons. He did whatever he had to do. And he turned himself into a commodity. The guy could do sitcoms. The guy could do action. The guy could do pretty deep, dark sci-fi stuff. This guy is talented as hell, man. Batista is rocking right now, just like the others. So when you have that level of popularity that you can create, a Vince McMahon, to his credit, has opened the door. If he didn't let them wrestle, he didn't let them promo and cut the promos that he did and do the stuff that he did, they would not be where they are today. Okay, The Rock, right? Goldberg, well, not so much Goldberg, but you look at Cena, you look at Rock, you look at Stone Cold, you look at Batista, you look at Brock Lesnar. They're all indebted into Vince McMahon and WWE because they became stars because of that company. But that's also a testament to the best that this company has. So why not showcase the best? But the IWC's asking for something else, right? Ronda Rousey, and then you just look at, I did read, I have got to rewrite this paragraph, but anyway, which way, you get where I'm coming from. The IWC is basically asking for something fresh. I got it. I see what you're saying. That's okay. And you're entitled to ask for that. But again, you're entitled. You are being entitled because you expect the company just to go and do things the way that you want it to because you feel like your voice has made all the stars. Listen, you have stood behind the stars that they have made. And there's been a few occasions where you've actually built stars higher than that because the company did listen at the time. You look at CM Punk, you look at Daniel Bryan, you look at AJ Lee, you know, the Four Horsewomen. I mean, you can see where, and all the NXT stars, yes, you went to those takeovers. Yes, you did those other shows. And you made those stars bigger than life because the crowd got behind them organically. But then also, the IWC was so engaged and they were so in arms together to try to go ahead and get stars over. Where did that go? The people that used to go ahead and root Daniel Bryan and overwhelmingly cheer certain stars to get that person over. And where did that go? I mean, sometimes you can get a little bit of a gimmick that will help get somebody over. The yes movement, getting the yes chance was the best thing Daniel Bryan ever got in WWE to get him over. Just that alone. And seeing everybody doing that, Vince had to say, damn it, that looks good. And everybody's putting their hands up in the air. Everybody getting up, putting their hands up in the air. So when you see the matches we have coming up, okay, so it's not Ronda and Becky. It's Ronda and Charlotte. It's Brock and Roman. Well, those are headliners. Oh, we've seen them over and over again. Well, that's been like that for years. What do you think the Attitude Era was? It was always Stone Cold, Rock, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and others, always at the top of the card all the time. You don't think we got tired of that too? Maybe people just have some, revisionist history, just have a short memory about that. Only remember the good times. Only remember when Edge speared Jeff Hardy off a ladder. Right? Let's not forget, when Jeff Hardy fell off a ladder and, swanton down to whatever. Like that kind of stuff. Okay, only remember a couple of the good times and some of the great promos out there. But man, there were times where in the Attitude Era, I was not necessarily satisfied either. Man, I got tired of some of the stuff they did. And the matches, 5 moves, all these people. I prefer at least I understand what they're trying to do. It's a formula. They've been sticking to that. They kind of let that go because at certain stars that really changed things up. Now they want to go back to it. And it's not so much a lack of faith in certain stars as it is a change in attitude and a change and just a directional change. So I have questions I'm going to answer real quick. Why did WWE switch gears and go the next in line and an NXT 2.0 route? Well, the next in line stars coming will have a ramp up to something bigger, but they will have performed in their prime years at work on the company. That's the other thing you got to remember, too. For Vince, it's always important. He's going to get these stars in. They're going to be in here for a fold for a while. And then at their most highest level of athletic competition is when he's going to have them in. Peak physical condition, peak performance at their prime of athletic ability. He's going to have them in here. And hopefully they're going to feel like that, as a sports franchise, they're going to just stay around. Stars like Big E, Liv Morgan, any of those NXT stars that they were let go, they weren't going to be able to make the kind of money needed to make the kind of return on investment that needs to be made now. For everyone that complains about how NXT got dismantled, the black and gold, well, look at all these stars now. They've all left the other organizations just because we're not seeing them on NXT and going spot after spot after spot and adrenaline rush after adrenaline rush after adrenaline rush, which I understand. It was like fed like a drug to you for years. Thanks to Triple H. He fed it like a drug to you. And honestly, towards the end of the NXT run, I got exhausted because you just couldn't keep doing that over and over again. When I look at that, what was it? The War Games match with the Undisputed Era, and I forget who they took on. And just seeing Adam Cole going off the top of the ladder, off the top of the cage, and, busting his ass going through a table to finish off a match. And I'm just saying to myself, these guys are just tearing it up and just over trying to do themselves. I'm like, what? When I saw those kind of matches going on, I'm just saying to myself, man, this is just overkill. They don't have to keep going and go near fall after near fall after near fall, big spot after big spot after big spot. I understand it's addictive. And now you're withdrawal, right? And that's what happened here. So people don't like that. Everything went to that. And the fact is that when you hear stars like Big E doing promos, he's not effective enough when he's by himself. He is with New Day. When he's together with New Day, they are over. So people are upset that Big E is no longer in the title picture. They gave him 6 months or plus in the title picture. I'm actually surprised they gave him that. But I think he was given that because of his years of dedicated service. He has been busting his ass ever since FCW. So he got his spot. Just like Kofi Kingston got the same thing. He got his spot. I don't think it has anything to do with color or anything with race, creed, culture, nothing. Because he can say he had all that time. He got to be on ESPN College Game Day for his alma mater, Iowa. He got to go and be on different TV shows. He got out there. And he was champion. And he did win a couple of matches as champion. And he was on TV a lot. So he doesn't feel special. Okay, but then what do you want? You want him to be off TV every other week? I mean, some people just, there is that part. And then Liv Morgan, they continue to keep her in the mix. Dewdrop, like look what the Elimination Chamber matches are. The Elimination Chamber matches are kind of the consolation prize for some of these stars. And there might be somebody that will get into the other title matches that are left. Okay, but that's fine. At least you got that. But after this, they will not be in the mix until after WrestleMania. And after WrestleMania Backlash, for that matter. So maybe in the run to SummerSlam, but more likely after SummerSlam, right? Somewhere in September. But in the meantime, when you look at what Elimination Chamber is, and you look at the stars they have, there are at least some stars they've been building since last SummerSlam. When you look at the Elimination Chamber match coming up, WWE Championship. So Seth Rollins, who was considered to be in that mix at day one. Austin Theory is a new name in the mix. Riddle, who's somebody that's on the come up that we know will eventually get to that point and being a main eventer. But right now working in such a good spot with RK Bro. And AJ Styles, who's just a perennial favorite. Then you look at the women's number one contender Elimination Chamber. You look at Bianca Belair, Dewdrop, Nikki Ash, Rhea Ripley, Liv Morgan, who have all been circulating and hovering around the titles of Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch for a while now. And that's it. Actually, those are all opponents that went after Becky Lynch. And at least they're here. At least they're in the match. And they're getting a chance to be showcased. At least they had this time. They should be lucky they got this. But everything has a good reason for it. I really believe that. Moving on to my diatribe. Next part is, why does a weekly TV product continue to be stale? Okay. When you're watching weekly television, remember, these days when we're watching TV shows, some of your favorite shows right now, okay, some of you might be watching Euphoria. Some of you might be watching Yellowstone. You might be watching, The Expanse or Reacher or, The Morning Show or whatever you're watching. Or The Mandalorian or Boba Fett. And you're watching 13 episode series. If you're watching anime, it's probably like, 11, 12, 13, 14, 20 episode series. And then you have to wait a year to watch them again. But they're all half an hour shows or hour long shows. There is something to be said about trying to keep the interest up in a format that is like this. Okay, there's a reason why soap operas are near extinct. When those shows that's to satisfy an hour, 5 days a week, and some of those shows have been around for 60 years. And they're also losing their audience. The bottom line is that WWE is working in an old format. And it's not easy in the days of streaming and short attention spans to keep people engaged. Nobody's programming that well in 3 hours and 2 hour formats. Not really. Movies, you could do that, but that's one standalone movie. But 2 hour shows, there is not one 2 hour show in prime time, except for SmackDown. They're the only 2 hour prime time show live. That is not sports, not a full sporting event type feel, but it's being conducted like a sporting event with multiple matches, the multiple cards. And then Raw, a 3 hour monstrosity, a show that has been, what is it now? 28 years, 27 years into 27 and a half. No, 28 years now, just past the 28th anniversary. You're looking at a show that, again, 28 years, they've had to consistently go ahead and fill. First it was an hour, then 2, now 3. And they've been 3 hours for what? About 15 years, something like that? And to be able to consistently go ahead and be able to build quality content, what they've been doing has been what they had to do. They do sandwich something interesting on both the top and bottom of the show, and they have to fill the rest of the time. No TV show is capable of doing that. Even when you're watching sports, if it's going to be 3 hours long, it is just the one game, and it's the competition that there is. And it's nonstop action. And in wrestling, you have to have the buffers so you can have stories being told, whether you like the way they're done or not. I mean, it's the reality of the fact that no one else is doing this better. Now, credit due, I like where AEW does and doing their 2 hour show. And they have so much going on because what they do is, they have an hour-long show that they film, and all they got to do is make sure to put 3 matches in it, maybe 4. But they have their featured matches, and they have the roster that's huge to be able to get filled time. And they just do matches after matches after matches, but good matches. And they do tell stories in between where, you get sprinkled around promos. You get sprinkled around packages. They do an excellent job of putting that all together to make a 2-hour show compelling. And what do we complain about? Are we complaining much about the angles of the storylines? Not so much. Do we complain about the wrestlers and maybe some of their in-ring work? Yeah, we could do that. You can absolutely agree. I can definitely argue with that. But who else is doing that? There are no reality shows. There's nothing else besides live sports. And you're talking about, a format where you have professional athletes and you have a story has been told, over a test of time, and people just sit there and watch it, and it's a spectator sport. Now, let me put it to you as well. In the wrestling world, just to apply to wrestling, regular TV viewers are accustomed to the programming they are comfortable with. And there are no shows that have really adhered to a format, a soap opera format, okay? I'll tell you, when I'm watching right now, I'm watching the old Dallas series. I told you this on the show. Right now, I'm at the point where J.R. Ewing has been thrown into a Cuban prison. I'm like, I want to know where he's going to go next. But even that show has its lulls. And to go ahead and do 26 episodes in a season, they have to go ahead and do some things to fill and buffer time. So some storylines are compelling. They have something that's watchable. But I'm not going to be over the top bragging about it. There are some storylines they have that might not have been so good. But they're weaving 5 or 6 storylines into an arc. And they do it every year. This show has to consistently do that all the time. And we can hear people say, oh, what if you just, created seasons for, where you take a little time off, or, you make sure you give one group of roster, time, and then you give some time off and they come back later. That's not going to make a difference, Wade Keller. Okay. So to try to have a show that's similar to an outdated soap opera format where there are cliffhangers and constant dramatic changes after every segment. Okay, there are some shows that I watch that were scripted. You can't even keep that up. I remember the show Empire. They tried to have dramatic, something that was like, ooh, kind of segments after every commercial break. And they were able to sustain that for 1 year. What did they have to do after that? They had to slow it down because you only have so much story to tell in that group with Alliance and Hakeem and Jamal and, Lucius and, come on, man. There's just too much there. And Cookie. How can I forget Cookie? God, I can't miss her. So I'm saying, you look at that right there in the whole circle. No one is able to put that kind of programming together. Even shows like AEW Dynamite or Rampage, NWA Power, Impact Wrestling, ML Fusion, or Azteca. Azteca Underground, MLW has been doing that, which I got to talk about that at some point. I've been really enjoying that. They just finished the limited series of Azteca and the return of Cesar Duran and the whole Lucha Underground feel to it. Hammerstone actually was doing an interview this week talking about it and lauding it. I really love that, but I got to get to that another time. Next question. Why is the IWC so disappointed to how WWE programming is today and why they think the way they do? Let me explain. Let me explain the card to you, as an old comedian Blake Clark used to say. The IWC, the Internet Wrestling Community, was trained in crash television. Now, why you feel the way you do, and you hate to think about this, inside your mind, in the back of your mind, you know who trained you to feel like this, trained you to be fantasy booking like you do, trained you to want all these certain stars to come up. Do you know who did that to you? Vince Russo. The man that you love to hate. Vince Russo, bro. That's the guy that created this system of chaos that you love. You're telling me that NXT Black and Gold, you couldn't tell me that you couldn't see a similar thing like this, that Vince Russo booked it? Vince Russo, I felt like I was watching Vince Russo booking when I watched NXT on a regular basis, the Black and Gold, towards the end part of the Black and Gold. It felt like a little bit of like a Paul Heyman thing to it, but really more Vince Russo. But the matches were booked better. The stars were great. Okay? But the booking was just like that. Over the top, spot after spot after spot. It was that. That is what you got. So whether it was the Attitude Era where Vince Russo was holding the pencil, and Ed Ferrara, or somebody else, at the time, the money that WWE needed was really from the programming and the pay-per-view. So the ratings that they were able to generate on a regular basis to get themselves 6 to 8 million viewers on a regular basis, and the advertiser dollars that came out of that based on the ratings periods and the pay-per-views, because they charged them pay-per-views. Some of you don't even remember that we used to pay. That's maybe I didn't pay, but some people paid $55 to $65 per pay-per-view. Remember, there were people at one time that used to spend over $700 a year on pay-per-views. On this company, now we only pay $5. Some of us don't pay $5. Some of us pay $10. But paying $5 a month. I mean, really, when you really put this all in the perspective, how much can we actually complain about something we don't really invest that much in? Okay. The fantasy booking is all based on how the Attitude Era taught us. And more importantly, how Vince Russo taught us. I can't believe it took this long for me to go and make this point, but it's true. I know people don't want to hear this, but this is the way it is. And maybe other people will go ahead and figure this out, and they'll say to themselves, okay, you're right. Okay, King of Podcasts, you're absolutely right. And when you get to grips on that, then you realize that all your griping about other programming out there, where AEW is such a, like this, this petulant chop, you're just saying the fans over there, some of them, they're very, they have a certain thing about them where they have to feel like this, loyal to the brand, and also have to complain. Like it's a recess, like a playground at recess. Really like that. A lot of immaturity on both sides. Okay, guys? Really there is. Ristic TikTok has that a lot, but hey, I respect you guys. I respect your commentary. And look, people make money off of it. They do really well. I don't have to say names, but I can tell you letters that are out there without going to the names. Letters from a city that specializes in taking the whole attitude and taking the immaturity that the IWC feeds into itself and just spills it back out. Like a tabloid, like a shock jock. Yeah. So people make money off of that. Good for you. Good for you. But now, the point that I've been talking about over and over again on this program. Every off season, every on season. It could be WrestleMania season. It could be the end of the year. Doesn't matter. The question, why WWE is not paying enough attention to the IWC? Well, come to grips with it, guy, okay? Learn to love it because it's the way it is today. The company's earning call for the year 2021 this past Thursday, it's proof they're making while they're making a slight profit, on the live events, including premium live events, they're making the most money on their broadcast partners supplying live content. $1 billion, 1.1 some odd $1 billion in revenue this year, 2021 last year. In professional sports, we sit through hours of content, and sometimes we don't get any kind of excitement or dramatic action that comes from it, but yet you still watch it. The wrestling, the sport that we're watching, is based on storylines. Meanwhile, you watch basketball or football or hockey, it's based on the competition, who wins and loses, and that's it. There might be stories you could say in between, but there's not any kind of, commentary or any kind of promos we're going to get cut in the middle of everything like that. But that's what you got to learn to live with. Which is why you just can't let WWE be end all be all. I have been talking and ramping up the fact and promoting the fact that this new wrestling alliance, the Forbidden Door and all that stuff, hey, it's everywhere else. And Vince McMahon, a few earnings calls back, He even said, well, we'll supply more talent out there for like an AEW. And meanwhile, the other organizations, because of all these releases, Impact Wrestling has done pretty well for themselves, getting themselves back into a certain spot. Good for them. And while some people might complain about the ratings, at least the ratings have gotten a little more consistent with what they have. Believe it or not. I mean, since they had the whole thing with Kenny Omega and the AEW partnership, right now, their numbers are doing just fine. Hey, first 4 weeks of Impact Wrestling. 104,000 to 111,000 to 126,000 to 182,000 viewers. That's 4 weeks straight. That's pretty damn good. Meantime, you have other programming that's out there that's rolling along, doing its thing. Listen, I enjoy NWA Power. I think, even though we don't have Docking Into the Fire as the theme music, I think it's doing really well. I've grown to like some of the stars they brought in with Scion and, trying to get used to Crimson going by a different name and Tom Latimer, of course, Nick Aldis and Trevor Murdoch, and seeing Mike Knox come back and Matt Cardona. There's a lot to watch and enjoy of NWA, and listening to Austin Idol Raven on commentary with Velvet Sky and Joe Galley. I enjoy it. The old school look of the arena. I love all that. It's an enjoyable product, and I can't wait for the pay-per-views coming up. That's good stuff. Crockett Cup coming up. And they got Power Search coming up. They'll have it in a nice arena, whatever. Impact Wrestling, I told you, I went to the show 2 weeks ago, and I got to watch both episodes. It looked good on TV. The Honor No More storyline's been good. Violent by Design's been pretty good. The Bullet Club being involved in that's been pretty good. Like, there's good stuff going on. Plus, Mickey James being involved in the mix in the Knockouts division and having a lot of different competition to go after. Moose holding the title and a lot of people trying to chase him. It's pretty fun right now watching Impact Wrestling. And then MLW is another story in itself. I enjoy MLW immensely. Azteca or Fusion. Watching Alex Kane and Beaumaye and Richard Holiday and now his thing going on with Alicia Latute, or watching Hammerstone, who's like the next incarnation of Hulk Hogan, who is fantastic. Jacob Fatu going through a face turn right now, who is also one of the most unsung stars there ever is. Incredible. And then you got to talk about AEW. And by the way, I didn't even get the chance to go and mention the biggest thing that happened tonight that I really enjoyed was the MJS celebration. That whole ridiculous, over-the-top heel promo that he put out there where the confrontation with CM Punk and that story continuing. I love that crap. The MJF was fantastic tonight. Fantastic. What a piece of shit, man. What a piece of shit heel. Fantastic. There is so much good wrestling going on everywhere else. Now, I could talk about those other programs, but I don't, because I know this audience, from much research I've been doing on this program, I always know that you guys want to hear about WWE first and foremost. WWE. So I do, because that is the intrigue. That's the place, the point of contention, the point of criticism we all have. Next thing in my diatribe is, what is WWE trying to evolve into? So, like I said, they're trying to incorporate a spectator sport-like style to their product. If you are to see compelling content, it is scripted short form. Think about all the shows that you enjoy right now. Imagine if they had to do that 3 hours or 5 hours a week for a full year, every year, for years. You are asking a lot of WWE to do that. You're asking a lot. You don't realize it, but you're acting because you don't, you're not in their shoes trying to do this. And we can complain about why the creative doesn't feel good, but then you have to understand why it's going to be the way it is. So you watch shows that are scripted, short form, delivered to us in 10 to 13 episode runs every year. The IWC, I think, asks for way too much, and that's okay. For a while, WWE cared about that because they can't make money like they did back then, listening all the time to their fans. They were in that middle part where they had that network and they had to have people adopt to it. So they had to make sure they had things at the time of the network to make sure they had something for people to watch, to enjoy. And so they fed upon the fan base that was remaining to help them out. Because there was that transitional period between cable being the most important thing and then their digital output, their streaming service, of which they were smart enough to get into at the early part of the time. This company's always been forward thinking, but now they're on a different level. And what they're doing is really big, really, really big now. And I say this as well. Vince's inner circle, listening to podcasts and social media, is coming to an end. Are coming to an end. The IWC's commentary would matter more if it wasn't always negative and just put in podcasts or on social media. The IWC has to create a new proverbial seat to the table as a collective group, investing your own money into the product. You got to put your money back in. Merchandise, being at all those live shows, making sure that you have the vocal, and making sure you have, groups together with whatever city you're in, and get your guys together to make sure that you have a united front, to make sure that your voices are heard in the crowd, over those kids, over those parents, to make sure they know what to do with the stars that you love. And that means these other towns that are not as big. I remember I used to complain about the towns where people were, say if it was Philadelphia or if they were in Nashville or Corpus Christi. It doesn't matter anymore. I thought it used to be an important thing, but you know what? The crowds have changed because now you got more kids, now you got more families, which is what the company wants, but they're not getting enough of them. They have to work on getting more stars that are to that level. So you have to go ahead. When the shows are in town, you have to come in together to voice grievances. You have to buy shares of their stock, become shareholders yourself, and you got to buy and wear their merch more often. Otherwise, the broken record chatter will continue. Remember, what if you're wearing merch? If everybody's wearing, if it was Big E or Liv Morgan, if Big E doesn't have the greatest shirt out there, then why don't you wear it? Wear it out loud and proud, everybody. And then they're going to have no choice to say, man, they're selling so much of these shirts. They always notice when that happens, and then guess what? Then they start selling, then they start looking more into the stars they have to build them up more. Yes, shirts. NWO shirts. Austin 316. Brahma Bull shirts. All that. That still matters today. If people would put their money where their mouth is. That's what the company expects of them. They're talking to investors. They're listening to investors, shareholders. That means you have to be collectively investors and shareholders themselves. Even though you're in the public, you're not professionals, it still is the same thing. And as we know, we look at what's going on with the earnings calls and everything that's happening. That's what I want to talk about next. Just a few highlights of what that earnings report said, because there's a lot to be said in there. Before I do that, I want to go ahead and talk real quickly about the Elimination Chamber coming up in a week and a half in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. We already have a number of matches set up, so we know for sure Elimination Chamber, WWE Championship, Bobby Lashley will defend against Brock Lesnar, Seth Rollins, Austin Theory, Riddle, and AJ Styles. Becky Lynch will take on Lita for the women's title, which, hey, that's fine. Listen, and for the fact that people complain about Lita and Goldberg coming back, they're filling a spot. It's road to WrestleMania. And so, the thought process here, okay, we'll put a couple of our, top mainstream, main event champions here in this point. We're going to put them in and say, okay, go ahead and have your matches. It's funny that Charlotte Flair doesn't have a match yet, but we'll see what happens there. But you look and you say, okay, you got a story with Lita and Becky Lynch. I mean, there isn't anybody else in the main roster you feel like would be in a good spot to go after Becky Lynch one-on-one. But right now, you're going to have stars are going to be contending. So for Lita to be in this title match and to get this here, it doesn't matter. Like, you want to see who's going to take on at WrestleMania in the Elimination Chamber that number one contender. So for everybody complaining about Lita having this spot, all those other stars that you want have a spot in the number one contenders match. Interesting. And there's still one other spot left, which I still think is going to be Bayley coming back. That's my thought. But she was on SmackDown, so that might not be it. Maybe it's going to be Asuka. You know what? I'm going to guess it's Asuka, because I don't think Bayley's moving from SmackDown to Raw. I don't think so. Now, Usos versus Viking Raiders for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. Raw Tag Team titles are not on the line right now because Riddle is in Elimination Chamber match. Mid-card titles, nothing. No US, no IC title, nada. They'll just be defended on TV if they're going to be defended at all. Which actually they are, wasn't it? Isn't it Sami Zayn and Shinsuke Nakamura this week, right? Actually giving us, I'll give WWE credit. They are giving us some, matches, and they're actually booking a little bit of shows right now ahead of time. I'll give them credit for that. But it is an undertaking to take up that much programming and expect it to be compelling every minute of every hour. It's asking for a lot. There is nobody in Hollywood that's capable of doing that right now. So they're doing the best they can. Now, the fact that they could use some fresh new talent and build them up, yes, I agree with you. I'm always going to agree with you on that. They've always needed to know how to do better with building stars. But they've been able to do it before if they get the developmental system right and bring in the stars that Vince wants to build up so that he doesn't shut them down. So there's not so much turnover. That's what he has to do. And see, that's why I kind of agree, because NXT, they did give people certain stars the chance to move up. And you know what? Then some just got knocked down and they just didn't matter. And so there was a lot of turnover in that. And the ones that did not want to move up to the main roster, they never did. So if they didn't want to go, it doesn't matter, does it? Anyways, Roman Reigns against Goldberg. Goldberg has his deal. He gets his matches. Saudi Arabia loves him, so let him have it. He's not going to be the one wrestling at WrestleMania, and we already know that Roman Reigns is not losing the belt. Becky Lynch is not going to lose the belt. Pretty obvious there. Raw Women's Championship #1 contenders match. Bianca Belair, Doudrop, Nikki ASH, Rhea Ripley, Liv Morgan, and to be determined. I'm going to guess it's Asuka. I'll put it right there. I'll make that bet. All right, let's get into the earnings call. WWE has grossed over $1 billion. Thank you, Nick Khan. So a number of people that were on the call. We talked about Nick Khan, talked to the Sports Business Journal. So revenue increased 12% to $1.095 billion, the highest in company history. Highest. Operating income up 24%. The adjusted OIBDA, after debt and amortization, whatever the operating income of whatever it is, up 14%. Then they also had the content moving from WWE Network to Peacock, and it does give them a larger audience and increasing viewership for their premium live shows, original series, and vast library. So for instance, Money in the Bank viewership in July was 25% higher than on the network in 2019. SummerSlam 30% higher. So they got more people watching, which is more important for them as well. So if they're not able to get people to go and watch regularly on the product, the fact they got 3.5 million Peacock subscribers watching the product, great, including myself. They're making money in the shows. Second highest in Royal Rumble history for the 2022 Royal Rumble in St. Louis. And there's other things they're doing right now. They got other marketing deals. Man, it's just a marketing machine. Khan announced they'll be doing WWE branded lottery tickets, and also they're expanding the partnership with Mattel, which has spanned in the last decade. They talk about the success of Day One, which not only was sold out, but carried viewership 15% greater than any other live event in WWE history. They also talk about the partnerships with celebrities like Bad Bunny and Johnny Knoxville. And Khan describing events like the Elimination Chamber in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia as key revenue drivers for the company, and that the company anticipates producing more international events in the future, which is what we were talking about a while back with the proposed pay-per-view in late August in the UK, whenever that might be. He also noted massive rights deals from Paramount Plus, Amazon, Hulu, ESPN, Hulu Plus, and NBCU. He added that he feels just a matter of time before Netflix and Apple inks rights deals of their own, and he expects an increase for the global media rights in the current light of the current climate of what they're going to be doing. And then the mainstream appearances. Stephanie McMahon mentioned this as chief branding officer. She mentioned Sasha Banks appearing in the cold open of the College Football National Championship game, watched by more than 22 million people, including myself. Drew McIntyre's appearance at the MTV European Euro Music Awards. Big E's appearance in the cold open, the heavyweight championship bout between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. Then you had Sami Zayn's recent interaction with Johnny Knoxville, appearing on Jimmy Kimmel Live to promote the Royal Rumble appearance. And then he also mentioned the Next in Line program, how it's targeting athletes who have sizable TikTok followings. And also mentioned the fact that 80% they've learned of the WWE's audience identifies as gamers and plans to use its gaming partnerships to continue to engage with its audience. So with the time I have left, I want to just take a couple of comments that were made from the transcript of the earnings call that was made that I thought were stand out. So one particular question that was asked was about media rights in terms of how you guys think about the fair value of your content through the legacy linear world versus direct to consumer. Traditional cable versus streaming. So the question Nick Khan answers her, he says that I think we've all collectively seen that scripted content is no longer working necessarily on broadcast television, certainly not the way it used to work. You're seeing the premium scripted creators shifting to streaming. Obviously, that started with Netflix years ago, so there are more openings in the broadcast linear space for live and unscripted content. At the same time in basic cable, you're seeing live work there as effective as it's working in broadcast television. Scripted content there also struggling a little bit, which creates more open real estate. So again, your top scripted content creators have really moved to streaming. You look at streaming, you look at the deals I mentioned earlier in the call, all those most are exclusively in the streaming space. So we all know from a few years ago that it was going to be the streaming wars and there would be a lot of beneficiaries from that. We'd like to think we're one of those with our Peacock deal that will grow. At the same time, broadcast and basic cable have been good to us, and people are still tuning in of an unscripted content in meaningful ways. So we think we had the triple play here. And when it comes to the renewal of Raw and SmackDown, he says that we feel as good about Raw getting another window of renewal and our SmackDown deals a few years ago as we did with our network deal with Peacock. So more money coming to the company. If they're doing it right, why wouldn't they? And I think that was just a whole lot there that you can look at. I had the link over there on WrestlingGoesWorld.com if you want to take a look at underneath this episode. And I have finished my diatribe for tonight. And I hope you understand where I was coming from, that it made a lot of sense. Because if you need to go ahead and just ask yourself, why are you complaining so much? Why are you bitter? Why are you constantly frustrated? And why is WWE doing the same thing over and over again where the same stars are on top and why other stars are getting left out? Well, just come back to this episode and you'll learn about it yourself. And you'll realize I'm right. Now, if anyone wants to dispute me on this, hey, listen, you want to come on the program? You want to email me? You want to comment about it? I'm all ears. kingofpodcasts@yahoo.com, kingofpodcasts@yahoo.com, or just DM me. Listen, I got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Find me if you want to reach me out there, and let's talk about it. Tell me if I'm wrong. Podcasters, open the door to you. If you're listening, come on and let's talk. Tell me if I was anything I said wrong in my diatribe. I'd love to hear from you. I can always be made to, be wrong about certain things, or maybe my opinion might not be the same as yours. I'd love to hear what your opinion is. So anyway, we'll come back for another Wrestling Obscure podcast next week. Thanks for listening in, because wrestling needs us.
Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at WrestlingIsReal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.